All right, we're gonna jump in here. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Board Leadership Calgary 2022. My name is Justin Solomilo from Alberta Community Development. I'm one of the members of the Planning Committee for Board Leadership Calgary, as well as Leslie Evans from the Federation of Calgary Communities on the call, as well as Phil Chung, who will be supporting our tech needs today. Thank you for joining us online. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories in Alberta of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Today, I am joining you from Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Hiskia, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Just a quick introduction here for those who aren't familiar with Board Leadership Calgary. We're a learning collaborative formed in 2013, really to organize affordable and accessible learning opportunities for board members and staff of smaller to medium-sized nonprofits. So excited that you can join us this year. If you've been to a past event, you know we're doing a little bit things different in the past few years, offering a number of great webinars the past few weeks. Staff and volunteers from a variety of organizations really work together to plan this event, including Alberta Culture, Federation of Calgary Communities, and other nonprofit leaders. Thank you to our continual sponsors with Service Credit Union, Simple Cloudworks, and the Friends of Federation of Calgary Communities, which is our fiscal supporter. Just a couple of online housekeeping. If you can hear me, good. If not, you might want to check some of your settings there. There also is a dial-in option, hopefully, that you saw when you logged in. We do have closed captioning for the sessions, and if that's something you use, you probably know that it's in the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just click any or show subtitles, and you can find it there. Any questions tech-wise throughout today, feel free to message Phil or I, and hopefully we can help you out. We'll be recording the session, and you will get the link in a few days here. And there will be an evaluation at the end as well, and you'll also get it in your email. So please fill that out as it helps us do some of our future work. Without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Gail Urquhart here. She has spent over 30 years working on the fundraising front lines of charitable organizations across Canada, providing strategic leadership, mentoring fundraising professionals and teams, and running successful fundraising programs and campaigns that focus on genuine donor engagement. Now a charity advisor and a high-performance coach, Gail partners with small and carefully chosen group of clients, sharing her hands-on experience to help create fund development programs and leadership practices that are built to fit and to help organizations where they want to go. So we welcome you today, Gail, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Justin. Hello, everybody. If someone had told me this many people wanted to get up on a Saturday morning and talk about fundraising, I would not have believed it until right this moment. So my heart is swelling, many sizes, that all of you folks are here to talk about this topic, which I'm very passionate about. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit what we're going to do this morning. I can really only give you a very brief overview, if you want to just go to the next slide, Justin, about fund development. It's a topic that I've spent 30 years learning, still learning, is what I would say. But I hope I will touch on some things that are going to be relevant to all of you in some form or fashion, recognizing that you're all perhaps at very different stages in your fund development journey. When you see that little toolbox icon, that means that I am in the background supplying through Justin some sort of a resource that you can draw on after the webinar. So watch for that, and I'll tell you what we're sort of putting into a little toolbox for you to take back to your desks and your organizations on Monday, and hopefully start using and finding some value in. Then we will do a little bit of a lightning round for as long as we have time left. Justin shared a list of questions that some of you supplied when you registered for this webinar, and they were, again, vast and far-reaching. So I've tried to bundle them a little bit, and we'll address some of them and as many of them as we can. And then I've got a little offer for you at the end of the morning. So I would first like to get to know you a little bit. So Justin, I'm gonna you can go to the next slide. I'm gonna ask in the chat room, and Justin's gonna work this for me. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being I'm terrified of fund development, Gail, or 10 being I love it, would do it all day long if I could. How do you really feel about fundraising for your organization? I'm just going to pause for a second there, and hopefully people will weigh in a little bit, and we'll get a sense of the overall comfort level.
Well, I've seen 6 in the chat, a few 1s, 4. We have 3
Okay.
3s, more 6s.
No
Quite
10.
a few. No 10s yet, but a few 1s.
Yeah.
A lot of 3s actually, 3s and 4s, and then I've seen a sprinkling of 6s. Someone just said a 7, a very emphatic 7. Someone even commented that they hate asking for money. So a good scale of range here, Gail.
That is not the first time I have heard that comment. That's great. And then another just little level set for me would be, if you have a fundraising goal established this year, what is that number? How much do you want to raise, hope to raise this year or next year?
100K, 40K, 250K, $1 million. Someone says they don't have a target yet.
Okay.
Someone says, I don't hate asking, just don't know how, including proposal writing. They want to learn. They want to raise 50,000,
Okay.
another $500,000, 24K, 100K, 200K. So, I mean, it looks like some substantial money here. $1 million again here, as much as possible, someone says.
Keep it coming. Okay, that's great. Thank you. That just gives me a sense, and it helps me appreciate, what topics to dive into a little deeper, and which ones maybe just provide a little bit of an overview. I also appreciate that we've got people here from all over Alberta and maybe some points outside Alberta. So I'm definitely a Calgary-based consultant. Doesn't mean I don't do work outside that realm, but largely my experience has been Calgary and national based. So I don't know as much about the Edmonton and surrounding regions. So hopefully some of the principles I'm talking to you about this morning and some of the resources will be applicable to where you are. I think I saw somebody from Quebec. So, I think we've got some folks weighing in from all kinds. This is the global world we live in. So that's great. So let's go to the next slide, please. So I guess the big question is, why do I have to learn about fund development and how to do it? I hear that often when I work with groups in the room. And here's some of the reasons why. Because we kind of have to play in the world we're in right now, where new realities are forcing us to think about revenue diversification. And some of those old, reliable government funding, for example, are less reliable now as the world gets more complicated, needs get more acute, and there's just the same amount of money or sometimes less money to go to more individuals and organizations in need. So it's just a must do in terms of revenue diversification, and having boards really look at that for their organization, given they wear is our organization viable hat as part of their board governance role. Also, I would say increasingly, it's kind of an expectation when you're being recruited to a board or to a job within an organization, volunteer or paid, that you have a little bit of competency there, and certainly you have some shared responsibility there. I always say this is a team sport, and it can't rest with one person in an organization, no matter the size, because that's a heavy burden to bear on the shoulders of one person. So really just learning about it and understanding it is an important thing to do. Doesn't mean everybody has to do it in the same way. And we'll talk about board roles and how they can be a variety of things when it comes to this topic further on in the morning. Here's the good reasons why to do it, because it really, really deepens your roots in the community with a gathering of friends and allies that also care about your work in the same way that you do. I think in this, again, complex, complicated world that we're living in, where some tough decisions are being made by not-for-profits and charities about whether they are going to be able to sustain and survive, the more friends and allies you can gather around your mission, and often fundraising and fund development does that for you. These are people that are raising their hands and saying, this organization is important to me. Don't do anything to mess it up, to people who are maybe have some domain over funding decisions. The last reason, and I think probably the most compelling one to think about, is fundraising and fund development create opportunities for you to take your organization from good to great, and in some cases truly transform them. So you know, having that opportunity to talk to people about your dreams and aspirations for the future of your organization is a reason why to learn a little bit about this topic. Next slide. So these are the questions that I would ask you to, if you haven't thought about them yet, think about them and maybe bring them back to your board table or your organizational meetings to talk about. Because one of the things you have to land on first is, how much money do you need, by when, for what? So for some organizations, it's, Gail, we need to raise $50,000 just to keep our doors open, lights on, and doing what we do so well. If we don't do that this year, we've got a real problem. Others are in organizations that have a little bit more stability in their fundraising or their core funding, that would say, you know, if only we had $100,000, we would answer that question. Do what? Add another program stream, reach out further into your geography. What would you do to enhance what you already do? And then the transformational ones are usually a big number gets plugged in there. And that's where you're really looking to fundamentally just change the game in terms of the work that you do. Sometimes that turns into a capital campaign. Sometimes it turns into adding another mandate to your services to further respond to what communities need to do. Sometimes I ask organizations, if somebody walked in to your community organization today and said, I have $1 million, what would you do with it if I gave it to you? Do you know what the answer to that question would be that day? So I know it sounds kind of, you know, dreamlike, but that has happened before to organizations, and it's happened to a couple that I've worked with, where out of the blue, they receive a call that says, you know, we are looking to do something in your space. What would you do with a large amount of money, or even a moderate amount of money? So having those conversations and being decisive, so that you have that answer to the question when you go out into the community, is some good work to do at the board table if you haven't done it yet. So let's talk about fundraising versus fund development. There is a little bit of a difference, and if we could go to the next slide, fundraising, my description of it, I describe fundraising as a short game. It's often episodic. So, you know, we do an event, we raise some money, and then we go a little bit dormant for a while until we need to raise some money again. I find quite often fundraising is, you know, happening from a position of need versus vision, and it's usually inconsistently applied, not on purpose by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of goes in ebbs and flows. You have a great fundraising person on your board or someone on staff, and then they leave, and then nobody knows what to do. All of that great traction gets lost, and then you have to start again. And then you have an event, and then nothing happens for 6 months. And then all of a sudden you need another $50,000. So you ramp up again. So it's really sort of ebbs and flows quite a bit. Fund development, I would describe as being a long game where you're saying, what's the vision of this organization? And how are we going to consistently apply strategy and practice that can withstand the ebbs and flows of losses of people or losses of one big donor that you've relied on for 10 years that all of a sudden has said, yeah, we can't support you anymore. It's very relationship based and is absolutely vision driven, because you want it to be vision driven in order to attract bigger investors of donations and philanthropy to your cause. So there's two things that are super important to being able to leap into that long game. One of them would be, you've wrestled those questions to the ground that I just showed you. What's the money for? Because donors will ask you. The other precursor is that your hair isn't on fire and you're in real financial distress. So to get fund development and that consistent long game going, you do have to have a little bit of a runway built. You have to have the gift of time on some level to be able to build a program to a sustainable level. So we'll talk more about that and how you might do that in a little bit. Next slide, please, Justin. So I'm sure many of you have heard or have your own or have started to build your case for support. The case for support, I usually say, that's a bit jargony. I like to say you have to answer the questions, why should I give you my money? So that is really ultimately what you're trying to compel donors to think about. Are you doing something that's compelling, that is going to have great outcomes, that is going to make a difference, and that matters to me, the person that you are trying to attract dollars from? So we're going to talk a little bit now about a case for support and what's the difference between a case for support versus a promotional brochure. Because sometimes people leap right to the promotional brochure and start designing it. I'm going to suggest back up a few steps and start to think about what you are going to be asking donors to consider, and are you giving them enough information to consider making a gift to your organization. So I do think there's 4 fundamental buckets for this. The first is your institutional plans. If you have a master plan, even if it's on one page, about where you want to go in the next few years, that's the best place to start. What are the priorities that you have operationally for your organization? And make sure that there's shared understanding of that. Would everyone around your board table say the same thing to that question? What would you do with $1 million or $100,000 or $10,000? So tying it back and starting from your institutional or your organizational plan is where you should start to build your case for support for donors, because they have to be aligned. Those conversations have to kind of run parallel. And I would say the institutional priorities comes first. So the case for support for me has always started as not a brochure, a Word document where I just answer all the questions, answer all the things that the donor is going to want to possibly ask me. It becomes then my touchstone document that I write once and well, that I make sure my board says, yep, Gail, that's the stuff. That is where we're going. And you've captured our priorities for the next few years. You've captured our proof points around why we're great and best positioned to do that work. And that is my Word document that I keep very, very close, because then I pull from it for every grant application, for every social media post, for every presentation I'm making to a Rotary Club. This is our story, but it's a Word document, not a beautifully designed brochure. After you've got that done, then go to your promotional pieces, whatever they might be and whatever your budget might allow. And it can stay a Word document, quite frankly, if your budget's strapped. Just maybe throw a little bit of bling on it in terms of some visuals and your logo and things like that. But the case for support turns into your promotional pieces, because you want to then have it be the absolute essentials of what you're taking out to the donor market. Really compelling, the best of your Word document, easy to digest, easy to understand. And then the last piece that spills out of your case for support document would be highly tailored grant applications, proposals to a community investment program that links to your work in some way, even for an individual. Although I would say individual giving, and we're going to talk a little bit about why individual giving is really, really important to pay attention to. Sometimes individuals will say, can you write that up for me and send it over? Well, you're not going to send them a 30-page document of all the best of your greatest hits. You're going to distill it to something that's highly tailored to that individual, ideally based on some conversations of discovery that you've had with them. That's kind of the flow for developing your case for support. Then if we go to the next slide, these are the kind of the 9 essential ingredients that should be in your case for support. Again, this is your Word document that donors will want to know. This is typically, if I've gone and had conversations with donors, they want to know the history of the organization. Who, if they don't know you already, who are you? What do you do? How long have you been around? Are you a credible organization? What's your highlight reel of things that you've accomplished? What are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to solve for bringing a community together around a neighborhood project, or solving for poverty in a specific area, or dealing with food insecurity? What's your plan, and what's your piece in solving for that issue, either locally, regionally, or beyond? How are you going to do that? And why are you best qualified to do it? We do kind of have to show people that we're good at this. And so if you've got some proof points, some evidence of things you've done before successfully, this is a time to be a little bit less humble and a little bit more, we've got this, we know what to do, we just need an investment of dollars to do it. Talk to the fundraising goals in your case for support. This is the question, what do you want to do? By when? So how much do you need to do it? And with some timelines and some identified outcomes. People always want to know how you're funded. And often when I see someone's first case for support effort, this is the piece that's missing. They haven't told the donor, how do you get funded now? And why do you need my money as part of it? So if your funding is 100% community-based, tell them that. If it's 100% community-based and 80% of it is usually fairly solid year to year, but 20% isn't, or whatever those ratios might be, 70% of it is government, 20% of it is from grants, 10% of it, I hope that adds up to 100, we rely on finding new donors every year to make this organization work on an annual basis. Don't go crazy with it in terms of telling them all your detailed financials, but a nice pie chart that tells them where your funding comes from now. Then a donor can say, I see where you want me to fit in here. So don't forget number 6, it's super important. Give an indication of how you plan to get whatever your goal is. You know, we heard 50,000, 100, million. Where are you going to get that money? And do you have kind of a roadmap built to get there? Hopefully some of the tools today will help you with that. And again, a donor's looking for their own place in that. Like, I understand, okay, you've got $1 million budget, you've got 750,000 secured, you need to raise 250,000 for that special project. Sounds good to me. You're proving that you can do it. Where do I fit in? Are you asking me for 100,000 or 50,000 or 25? They need to understand what their picture, where they fit into the picture, and how to give. And this again can be not laborious, but light. You can become a monthly donor. You can become a change maker, or a leader circle part of our organization at whatever the number might be, $1,000 a year. Again, we'll talk about where your line might be for those in a little bit. Number 9 is also the place where I see people forget to talk about it in their case for support. Who else is on this board? Who else is involved in this organization? People like to come on board with organizations where they have a sense leadership is strong, leadership is committed and passionate. Sometimes it's great if they know some of the names that are on that leadership list, be it your board, your fundraising campaign leadership, even some of the donors that you already have that are stalwart, good supporters that are willing to, again, raise their hand and say, I love this organization, here's why. Those are really nice pieces to put into your case for support. The other piece would be testimonials, of course, when you look at number 4, why you're qualified to do great things. You can say it. Ideally, if people that have benefited from your organization say it, that much better. So people who have benefited from your services, seen how great you are, and are willing to amplify that for you. These are all essentials for your case for support. So there's a toolbox item there, I see. So there's a case for support outline in the resources that Justin and crew will send out to you, and just goes into these a little bit more detail to remind you what questions to answer. And again, answer all the questions, get it all out on the page. And then when you start to develop your promotional materials, start to judiciously take some stuff off your brochure page to say, well, we know this, but we can leave that for a conversation. Get to the essence of what's in that Word document. So once you've got a case for support, this is the hard part, you guys. Now what? We've got it all written down. It's beautiful. We think we're great. Now, who can we talk to about it? Where do you find these donors to talk to about this brilliant work that you're doing in your organization? My advice to you is this. Always focus on those that are predisposed to care about what you care about. It can be daunting to look out in the world and go, okay, there's, thousands of foundations, there's thousands of corporations, there's millions of people. How do we find the ones that care about what we're doing too? So if you flip to the next slide, Justin, here's what I would suggest. Don't start at the outer ring, start at the inner ring. Start with the donors that you have, even if you just have one. And I'm assuming, hopefully, everybody online has one. Maybe not. If you're just starting, you might not even have one. But when you get one, focus on those people that have already said, I love what you're doing. Here's some proof of it. I'm going to give you some money to keep doing what you're doing. So keep those people the very closest, and don't assume that if they've given once, they won't give again. Don't assume that if they've given once, they might support this and that at your organization. We're going to talk a lot about having face-to-face conversations with people. And while it's a little bit scary, once you start and realize it's just having great conversations, some of that fear hopefully will go away. The next circle of predisposition would be who's given to you before, and who might, again, once they've already given, even if they sneak away from you through some of those ebbs and flows of your organizational steady state around fundraising, they are more likely to be drawn back than that outer circle of everybody else in the world. Who's on your mailing list now? Be it your newsletter mailing list, if you have one, your Facebook followers, your e-list or e-blast list. Who's on that list? For some reason, they joined your mailing list. So we're going to do some thinking around how do you bring them out into the sunlight to say, yeah, I could do more. I could do more than open your email once a month. The next layer is like-minded people, individuals, organizations, agencies. Who likes what you like to do? Who cares about what you care about? That's a really important layer as well in terms of growing beyond the people you've already met. And then everybody else. Next slide. This is just another way to look at that idea of predisposition. Who cares about what you're doing? You, obviously. People you know probably to a degree care about what you're doing because they care about you. People they know, people who care about the same things as what your organization is doing, other organizations that care about the same things as you're doing. And I would describe that as potential natural partners, I call them. You know, in the world we're in right now, where everybody is trying to be sustainable, impactful, viable, it's a time to really think about partnering with like-minded organizations, because I think eventually donors will increasingly force us to the table to have those conversations. It is not that it's impossible for everybody to be sustained, but donors, I've worked on a campaign before in my career where donors drove partners to the table and said, don't both of you come to me for money. Get in a room, get it together, figure out what you want to do collectively, and then come to me. So I think we're going to see more of that in the years ahead. And then people in the right time, space, circumstance to care about your organization's work. Sometimes that is episodic as well. I work with a long-term care organization, and it's been interesting to me working with them over the last couple of years that long-term care is more episodic in a family's life. You know, everybody wants to have their person age and die at home. Not always possible. So sometimes that requirement for safety and health needs to see them move into a long-term care center. But then once that life ends, that family tends to go away and not care about that cause again until they have to, versus a lifetime attachment to a cause. So sometimes that ebbs and flows for people, both in terms of their need to care about your cause, but also in terms of their circumstance of being able to support your cause. You know, a 20-year-old generally has less money than a 40-year-old, generally has less money to commit to charity than a 60-year-old, generally. Not always true, but so finding the right time and space for people to engage with your work is something that you need to consider as well. Next slide. So this one is I think an important piece of work to do in any organization. Now, if you're in a large organization where you've got a really robust database where you push a button and it does all of this analysis for you, lucky you. But I still come back to this a lot, whether I'm working with a small organization or a large organization, because sometimes people don't really quite understand who's on their list already. So pulling that list forward and taking a look at it and considering, what do we know about that name on our list? And considering, do they have great capacity to give that we know about? We don't always know the answer to that question. And are they engaged in our work? This is going to help you perhaps bucket where to spend your time in terms of building relationships that might turn into donations and money for your organization. So if you look at the left-hand side there, the capacity to give, we don't always know how much people make. In fact, often we don't know how much people make or have to devote to donations and philanthropic giving. But sometimes we do. Through research and through people telling us, quite frankly, that they're ready to consider a large contribution. The level of engagement along the bottom is, do we know how much they care about the work that we're doing? Are they a passive experiencer of our services, information, or are they really charged up about what we do? And you know, they come out to things, they do stuff on our behalf, they volunteer. These are indicators of engagement that we need to pay attention to. So if you look at your list, if you have 10 names on it, or 100, or hundreds I'd encourage you to go through this exercise if you can. So the top left-hand corner, potential champions. This is usually where I see people gravitate to and say, let's build a list of all the rich people in town and let's figure out how we can get to them with our cause. You can spend a little bit of time doing that, but let's think about what we know about those people. Maybe we have an indication that they've got resources. Do we know what they care about? Maybe we have a little bit of an indication of that. And do we know anybody that knows them, or do we know them ourselves? Those are things to consider in terms of how engaged that individual is. If we know they have ability to give, but don't care about us or don't know about us, then you're probably not going to get very far very fast with that quadrant. The one just below it, the passive experiencer of your organization, often these are people that are just on your mailing list and you don't know how they got there and you don't know why they're there, you don't know who they are, but maybe they took the moment to sign up. So maybe there are ways to learn more about them by inviting them to things, doing surveys, asking them to volunteer, but they're the question mark, right? And the goal would be to move both of those quadrants over to the right-hand side of higher engagement. The vocal advocates one, these are people and organizations that love you. Often they're volunteers, but they might not have high capacity to give. Don't write them off in your fund development program because of that. They are beautiful, beautiful amplifiers of your message. They go out into community, and if you arm them with a few key messages to say, here's what my organization is doing, here's what they need to do next, are you interested? Some kind of call to action. They can be a little bit of a boots on the ground group for you that is incredibly passionate. So just because they can't give you more than maybe $25 a year or nothing, utilize their talents and their passion for your organization. The one above it, champions. These are folks that have high engagement with your organization and have, I'm calling it high capacity to give. It does not mean that they're millionaires. Look at the section to the right there to say, what is that line that would say, this is a big gift for our organization? Is it $500? Is it $250? Is it $10,000? Is it $1 million? That upper quadrant, if people are playing above that line in your organization, they are people to spend the most of your time with and on in terms of furthering your engagement and really helping them understand what you want to do, because they have both resources and heart for your organization. So before we move on from this slide, I'm going to suggest that you spend a lot of time in the upper right-hand quadrant. I would say 50% of your fund development time. I would spend 30% with your vocal advocates, getting them further equipped to spread the word around what you're doing. I would spend, I'm going to say 10%, 15% maybe of time in the potential champions area, trying to engage those folks that are on, quite frankly, everybody's list in your communities probably. And then I would spend whatever's left, can't do the math, on that passive experiencer quadrant. And this is an area that might have a lot of people in it, right? You might have a mailing list of 100 names or 200 names. But if you spend all your time trying to convert a passive experiencer, it'll be at the cost of those other three quadrants, and particularly the ones on the right-hand side. So try and do your engagement with the passive experiencer in bulk, if you will, with your newsletter content, with your e-blasts, with a phone program that your volunteers might do, with a survey. Spend some time there to try and pull them up or across, but don't spend all your time there. Homework for you to do. Next slide, please. Justin, I'm going to assume that you are going to break in if there is, burning questions that you think I should be addressing or anything that's coming through on the chat. But for now, let's ask this question, if we could, Justin, in just a few words. Why do you think people donate to anything? To a charity, to a not-for-profit, at the door?
Someone says it feels good to give, emotional connection, makes them feel good. They believe in the cause, values alignment with the mission of the organization, see the ask potentially through social media and feel at this time if they can support, believe in or connected to the cause, a few emotional connections, to the charity involved, and that idea of feeling good to support. Perhaps there's a personal connection as well.
Yeah. Okay, this group is smart. Those are all correct. So if we go to the next slide, there has been some study done on what motivates people to give, and these 4 things rose to the top in a study I saw a couple of years ago. And it's about that idea of not giving to an organization, but giving through an organization, because these are things that I care about. So it's to fix a problem that they worry about. It's something they see in their world that really gives them a worry, and they want to do something to help that. They want to sustain or expand on a solution that they believe in. So they see good work and they see that it's working, and they want to help an organization or a solution scale, even if it's whether $25, $100, or $1 million for that person that has that goal. And they want to learn more about what they're interested in. So, you could imagine that would be relevant to arts and culture organizations where passionate about chamber music, and I want to make sure I can learn a little bit about that as I do my community interest things, and ultimately to make the world a better place in small ways, medium ways, or big ways. Yeah, so bang on, you've got that. Here's what's interesting about this is it's the same things that you all care about in respect to your organizations. It's the reason you joined the board. It's the reason that you volunteer for this organization that you're with. It's the reason you work for the organization that you're with, because you have passion for it. Donors have passion too. They just demonstrate it in a different way. And if that way is giving you a gift of funds and resources, that can be as passionate, but that's their vehicle for helping and supporting. So what's the biggest reason of all? Don't go to the next slide. That people give, and maybe just there's a big one. What's the real big reason why people give? Anything new coming up, Justin?
Some folks have said because of the tax write-off, because someone asked, because of a hope or legacy, want to feel a purpose in making a difference, to be recognized, perhaps.
Yeah, sometimes people want to be recognized, for sure. We're going to talk about that too. Someone got it. It's because someone asked. Someone asked them to give. So, there's if you don't ask, they're not going to give. So we do really need to, unpack our feelings of fear and anxiety about asking someone to support something that we're passionate about, and they might be passionate about too. So asking is going to be a predominant theme as we start to get into planning and making this fund development journey happen for our organizations. Let's go on to, oh no, we have no plan. That's a challenging one for organizations. And you saw at the beginning with some of our slides, donors kind of expect you to have a plan. when you're coming to ask them for money, particularly if you're asking for significant amounts of money. So getting a plan is a really, really important piece of work. If we go to the next slide, you can see by just looking at this slide for 2 seconds why it's confusing to get to a plan, why it's daunting to get to a plan, and why it's a bit scary to figure out, yeah, but what should we be doing? What's right for our organization? We can't do all this. I don't know how to do that part. So needing to assess and pick lanes for what's the best track forward for your organization is a really important piece of considering what the plan should be and should contain. So that also ties back to the dollar figure, your goal amount. If you're in an organization that has historically raised $100,000 annually, and you want to scale something to $1 million, then there's got to be runway to get you there, and there's got to be some incremental steps to get you to a state where you can attract that level of scaled investment and maybe do things a little differently than you've been doing for your annual $100,000 campaign. So ultimately, next slide, please, Justin. Ultimately, we want to get to sustainable fundraising, right? We don't want to start every year going, I wonder where all that money's going to come from this year, and panicking about it as a board or as the people that are tasked with driving the fund development program. So having a plan written down is fundamental to that work. And it doesn't have to be onerous. It doesn't have to be, a binder full of plan, but it needs to be deliberate, thoughtful, because it not only keeps you focused on what to do, it keeps you disciplined around what not to do, and chasing every squirrel that comes along when it comes to a new fund development opportunity or strategy. Ultimately, building sustainability into your fundraising program comes down to asking, and I'm going to share a magic formula with you in a few minutes around how to build in a little bit more assurance that you're going to get to your dollar goal. But there's no getting around it. Asking people for money has to be part of the plan. So figuring out how you resource that will be a conversation. Keeping donors once they've given is incredibly important, and more so now than ever before. Back to that circles of predisposition. If you have a donor or have had a donor, much of your effort and energy needs to go there, because donors actually don't stay at very high rates when they're early on into an organization. If I were to talk to 4 or 5 of you that are online today and ask you to give me $25 for my cause, and you did, I would say thank you. And then I would say, what can I do to keep all 5 of you when I come around to ask you again? So we'll talk a little bit about stewardship, but here's the jarring rates at which first-time or new donors leave an organization. If I ask 5 of you for $25, the likelihood is that 4 of you aren't going to give to me again. So that means every time I'm trying to find 4 new people, 4 new people, 5 new people, 4 new people. So stewardship and keeping engagement of those donors that you have is incredibly important. Once you do that through personalized contact, great communication, stories about the difference you're making, you will see them stay more at a rate of about 60%. And if you inspire them to become a monthly donor, they almost stay forever. So establishing as much predictability for your revenue and its timing in your plan is the goal. You don't want to start every year going, okay, fresh page. We need another $100,000 to keep our group going. Where are we going to find it? If you've been asking people to make further out commitments through monthly giving or through multi-year pledges, you will know what your runway is the next year, right? Because you will know, gosh, $1,000 is coming in for monthly giving this year, so we can count on that. We've made 20 donor relationships where they've made 2-year commitments or 3-year commitments, so we've got a little bit more runway. Here's the magic of monthly giving. Monthly donors, once they sign up, they stay at more of a rate of 80-90%, and they give more than that one-time donor. So again, I would say if I ask one of you for $25 and you bless me with that donation, I will say thank you, and I will try and steward you beautifully, and so that you will say yes again to me. If I ask another of you to consider a monthly donation at $10 a month or $5 a month, the price of a high-priced Starbucks latte, and you stay, that's going to be more over 12 months than that $25. And that monthly donor is going to stay for years, likely, because it's kind of hard to get out of monthly giving. You have to go, oh, how do I do it? Oh, I've got to find a phone number. I've got to call them. I've got to say cancel. Most people tend to stay, particularly if it's a small amount. And that runway gives you so much time to talk to that donor about beautiful work you're doing, the impact it's having, opportunities to engage and learn more. The relationship starts to build, right? And sometimes if those monthly donors stay, that becomes a very, very fulsome donor pool to talk to about legacy giving when they get to that stage and circumstance in their life. And they're ready to say, what have I cared about during my lifetime? Yeah, that group that I've been a monthly donor to for 20 years. Next slide. So getting to a plan. It starts with picking the best strategy for you. Almost always when I go in to talk to a group specifically about their work, the subject of a gala comes up very, very quickly. We should do a gala, Gail. And my answer back is always, should you? Should you do a gala? Especially now, I would say be very thoughtful about getting into the gala business or even the event business generally. COVID has changed us. And, while people are still going out to events, some of us are nervous about it. And just the sustainability of events, I see a real sort of shift occurring, not for every organization. Some are tried and true and they'll fill the room till forever. But some are really, really struggling with having an event. Doesn't mean it's not a non-starter, but just be really thoughtful about why you're doing the event and have you got the resources to do the event and what do you do after the event to ensure that you're building relationships. So picking the best strategy might be driven by how much money do you need to raise by when? What does the external environment look like for fundraising for your particular cause right now? Is there a lot of opportunity or less opportunity? Do you have the ability to access grants? And if you do, how are you going to get them written and submitted and cut through the very, very intense competition that area has going? So picking the best strategy for your particular organization, super important. Then pick the channels to get there. Have you got a funding base of 100 people or 1,000 people? Are you going to ask them to renew every year? How will you do that? So what are the activities that you're going to do to fundraise? And again, be deliberate. You can't do them all that were on that busy slide. So pick the best bets for your organization based on some analysis that you're going to do, and there's a toolkit for this on what would be your best bets based on what you've done previously and what the field of opportunity externally is. Then somebody's got to do the work. Eventually, somebody's got to do the work. So assigning resources to those methods of fund development. If you just put it on your plan, but you haven't assigned it out to say, this is the person that's, and I mean the person, names in those boxes, that is going to do it by when, chances are you're going to get stuck in that picking the best methods and having it on your plan stage. So assigning resources is an important part of the plan template that you're going to see in your toolkit. That crazy acronym that you see there, WWDWBW, who will do what by when? Best question you could ever ask at the end of every conversation around fund development, planning, and execution. That's where I see it fall apart all the time, because things drift. You might have the very best intention of reaching out to that donor after you've had an exceptionally great conversation with them. Get down to the car and you go for lunch and nobody speaks of it again. Weeks pass, months pass, and you go, oh, we said we were going to get back to Gail because she said she was kind of interested in our work. Well, now I'm sitting here going, were you really interested in having me be a partner with you? So who's going to do what by when? Probably the most important part of any plan that I make and any interaction that I have with the donor. What do we do next with that relationship? The fourth bucket that I just think is really, really imperative, especially for organizations that are feeling less confident in their fund development prowess, is just try. Just leap in, learn by doing. It's not always going to work out. It's not always going to feel great. It's going to make you nervous, but you're going to learn something every time. And that learning by doing is just going to sharpen your skills and sharpen your comfort level that much more, that your next year plan will say, we tried that, remember, it didn't work, and I don't think we should keep trying that one. I think we've learned enough to know that we are not golf tournament experts. Let's play here in our next year plan. So those are the 4 buckets about thinking about getting to a plan. The next buckets are a little bit more specific. So I think there's generally 4 things to write down. The first is figuring out, have you got the infrastructure built to say, we are open for business when it comes to fund development. We're ready to talk to donors. We're ready to receive their gifts. We're ready to take good care of them. We have some systems in place. This includes policy, which is really important to boards that have a governance role. There's probably 2 policies that I think are really important for a board to consider if you haven't got them yet. The first is a gift acceptance policy. What are you ready to accept in terms of gifts from community? And it seems like a bit of a no-brainer question. Everything, Gail, all cash. We'll take on all comers. But depending on who you are and the values and mission of your organization, there might actually be donor money that you aren't prepared to accept. So you really need to think that through, as well as what types of gifts are you prepared to accept. You know, cash is the best, the easiest to deal with, but some gifts can get complicated. You know, gifts of property, gifts in kind, gifts of land. They come with complicating factors that you really do want to spend some good upfront time as a governing board to say, we've thought this through. Should the conversation come onto the table, we know that we are prepared to accept gifts of property, and here's what we would do with them. We would do an environmental assessment and we would sell it immediately. You know, that's really important upfront working conversations for boards to have. Process pieces is, are you set up to serve a donor well in that you've got some sort of a tracking system? Doesn't have to be a database. We will talk about databases in one of the toolkits. It can be a spreadsheet, but you've got to find some way to track those donors so that you know who they are, where they, how to reach them, spell their name correctly on the tax receipt, get the tax receipt out, and know that you can go back to them again and it'll be accurate, timely process pieces to your gift acknowledgement and your gift receiving processes. So this is the boring bucket, but I call it the pots and pans bucket most often. Nobody wants to wash the pots and pans, but they must be done, right? Because they don't fit in the dishwasher. So you have to spend time on this really, really fundamental stuff. Then there's communications. You've got to communicate internally to whatever your internal group is, those close to people, board, volunteers, staff, and externally to the world, predisposed to care about what you're doing. Third bucket is the asking bucket, and that takes all kinds of forms based on what you've said. Yeah, we could do that, or we shouldn't do that. And these are the revenue channels we're going to focus on. So you build out your plan robustly in this section to say, when are we going to ask people? How are we going to ask people? When would we do that event if we're doing an event? What does that capital campaign look like? And what's the timelines for it? And then the fourth bucket is just to monitor, watch, track. If it's not measured, it's not managed. So how are you doing against the plan elements? And what are you learning along the way? Do you have to adjust course? Do you have to say, well, we thought we were going to do 3 events this year, breakfast to talk about our cause. We only have the resources to do 2, we realize as we come out of summer. And then that forward planning. What did you learn this year? What can we pull out of the parking lot to add to next year? But those are the 4 buckets of activity. Next slide, please. So building your plan, a couple of toolboxes that you can draw on after the fact. One is a workbook that will take you a little deeper into how do you look at your data? How do you figure out what you already know about the people that are supporting you? How should we check in on those policies, systems, infrastructure, and roles? There's a bit of a workbook there, a checklist there for you to say, oh, we've got that, oh, we don't have that, and we should get it. Figuring out your budget and priorities. What do you want to raise? What for? By when? And then figuring out what your internal and external environment, what's going on inside your organization and outside your organization that is going to impact your ability to be successful. So there's a SWOT analysis tool in the toolbox in the workbook. And then plan the work in each bucket, work the plan in each bucket, and learn along the way, monitor and adjust course. So in the toolbox, you've got a workbook, dives a little deeper. You can do that together or hand it off if you have a fundraising person on staff to consider or check against what you're doing now. And then the other toolbox item is a template for a fund development plan that you can populate with all your things, see if it works for you. It's pre-populated with some of the things that I think you maybe should be paying attention to. Hopefully you already are, but if you're not, think about them. And as I said, it's not a binder because binders gather dust the minute that big bulky plan lands on an organization. Maybe it can be 5 or 6 pages for you. Bring it back to every board meeting. How are we doing? How are we doing against the who's going to do what by when? How do we need to adjust course? Next slide. Asking for money. Oh, it's hard, but it's not impossible. So quickly in the chat room, let's just say I'm a tech wizard, and I've raised lots of money, or I've made lots of money, and I'm maybe potentially a donor to your organization, and I've granted you a 30-minute meeting with me. What would you want to talk to me about in that 30 minutes, and what would you bring with you to the meeting?
So Gail, maybe while folks are typing in the chat, just a couple of questions that have come in, if you're okay to answer it related. I know many nonprofits out there are not registered charities, so they obviously can't give tax receipts. Does that change the way folks plan or look at their fund development strategy?
It does a little bit, because obviously it shrinks a little bit your revenue channels. However, in the lightning round, there is a tool that I'm giving you, because increasingly what's happening is that funders, particularly foundations and corporations, are recognizing that there's a little bit of an equity issue with registered charities and not-for-profits that are disadvantaged to access funding for their equally good work.
Right.
So right now there is, you may be following this in the news, some of you, there's a move afoot around trust philanthropy. And there is actually some things going through government right now that would see a new bill that would expand the ability for funders to support not-for-profits that either can't meet CRA standards for registration, or don't want to or don't need to by virtue of their work. So
Right.
those guidelines were expected in the fall. They're not out yet, but funders, some things move slowly in government. They're expected this fall. They're waiting on a Budget Implication Act, and then they should be going out to funders to seek feedback. I'm really encouraged to see that happening, because I do think it levels the playing field and does bring some equity. Right now, not-for-profits can seek sponsorships, and talking to organizations, corporations about partnerships on that basis doesn't require a tax receipt. And some funders increasingly are providing support to not-for-profits.
Cool.
But I think that environment's going to get better in the next few years. That's the plan, anyways, of government.
Great. Thanks, Gail, for sharing that. So some of the chat comments related to the question here, finding out about their interests, someone talking about how specifically the potential money could be used. So what are the advantages to the donor? What organizations they donated to in the past? Someone said they bring them on site to experience the work, include impact stories. Folks talking about some of the stuff you talked about, bringing their business plan or strategic plan, a giving guide, asking questions to learn about what the funder will be passionate about. Some people talking about specific projects that could be exciting. But, a few people commenting on, let me find out about the donor first, their interests and things like that.
You're all way, way advanced in this. So yes, to the next slide. This is often the way it goes, and it's certainly the way it went early in my career. If I had that 30 minutes, I'd come in and I'd take up 28 of them telling them about the charity and what's so great about it, and realize I walked out of that room not knowing a single thing about the donor. So that was a hard lesson to learn early on in my career. So don't leave without knowing as much as you can about the person sitting across from you, would be the advice. A way more productive conversation would be lots about the donor, a little bit about the charity, the most compelling things about the charity. So if you have 30 minutes, I would probably suggest divide it up this way. 5 minutes, maybe not even that much, the chit chat to just warm up. 5 minutes about your agency's work. If you can get your story out in 5 minutes in a compelling way that inspires interest, try to get to that. And that leaves 15 minutes for asking questions about the prospect that are related to your agency's work, but not always. So if you, for example, run a summer camp, you're a accomplished leader in the community. Did you go to summer camp? What did it mean to you? Did it change you in any way? Here's what we do to try and set young people up for success through a camp experience. There's a great book called Powerful Questions. Forget who the author is. It's on my shelf back there. I'll send it on to you, Justin, if people aren't aware of it. That will fuel that 15 minutes for you. The last 5 minutes, wrap up with an ask of some kind. And I would say, is it a mini ask or a money ask? Depends on where you are in the relationship build out. Next slide will show you what a mini ask might be. So yes, engaging donors by talking with them, best tool in the whole toolbox of fund development. So there's a engagement model in there that you can spend some time on and consider what works for you. I think there's two kinds of great conversations. One's a discovery conversation. What can I learn about you today? Go in with a desired outcome. I want to learn about Justin, what he cares about. And I want to find some ways to build relationship with Justin and rapport with Justin that would enable us to make an ask of some kind for him at the end of that half hour, if it's not an ask conversation. Justin, do you have any advice for me based on what you've heard about our agency's work? Would you ever consider coming out to our summer camp and taking a look at what we're doing out there? Is there anybody else you think I should be talking to about this work that you're aware of in the community? Will you give us feedback on our case for support? We're just developing it and we really need some external eyes on it. Gives you a reason to gain value from Justin and a reason to go back to Justin and continue the conversation. In an ask conversation, again, you go in with a desired outcome. Got to be prepared to flex. If Justin's having a bad day and he's looking at his watch and the door, I'm going to adjust my desired outcome to Justin's desired outcome. But an ask conversation must make an ask of a very specific kind, out loud. So Justin, you know, you've heard a lot about our work. Would you be willing to entertain the idea of sponsoring our canoeing program for $10,000 this summer? It'll get 40 people, 40 young people equipped to canoe safely on Lake Lala, and it'll change their summer and perhaps their life going forward because they've engaged in teamwork, blah, blah, blah. So there's a toolbox for that. Next slide. Here's the magic formula. If you have a goal, be it $10,000 or $1 million, the magic formula is this. If you do enough asks, next slide, please, Justin. And if they are high quality asks, you will, in my experience over 30 years, make your goal. When I've worked in organizations and been part of teams that made exceptional asks, but not enough of them, we didn't make our goal. If we were making lots of asks, but just kind of throwing them out there in a passive way, volume, but low quality and no follow-up, we didn't make our goal. When we struck that balance, we have always made our goal in the projects that I have worked on. So a tool that is in your toolkit, next slide, is a gift chart. This one does look a little scary, but the thinking is relatively simple if you haven't seen one of these before. Break your goal down into bite-sized chunks that match up with your prospects, and then you will very easily see where you have no prospects that might give to you at the, in this case, $500,000 level, but lots that would give to you at the $5,000 level, and you just calibrate this, and this becomes your roadmap to get to that goal. I've used this tool, whether I've been raising funds for a $100,000 project or a $300 million capital campaign. You just adjust the numbers on the side there, but it gives you a way of breaking down a goal that makes it feel somehow more achievable and that you can track and measure against to say, we haven't got enough prospects. We need to do more community awareness building, more great conversations, more discovery conversations. Or our gift chart, these gifts are too high or too low. So more on the toolbox for that one, but really encourage you to use it if you're not using a gift chart. Quickly on the board's role in fund development. Here's a list. Not everyone is prepared or, quite frankly, should be out in community asking for you. It's not everybody's thing. And the sooner that we accept that, the better. But I don't think we should let anyone off the hook in this team sport of doing something to support fund development in small organizations, particularly where there's governance and you got to roll up your sleeves as well. So board members can bring that strategic thinking from their particular universe to your fund development planning. They might have insights into certain industries, sectors, government, granting agencies that you don't have at the staff level. Everyone, if you're passionate about the cause, and I'm assuming you all are because you are working for that cause and you're here on a Saturday morning, can introduce people to new relationships if you're not comfortable having those discovery conversations on your own, or shouldn't if there's a conflict of some kind. You can always invite people and bring people to new events, be those tours or golf tournaments or galas or performances. Have great conversations on behalf of the agency. So when you figure out what is so great about your agency, when you do that casework, distill it down to some key messages that you're all comfortable saying, well, here's why we do this work and here's what we hope to achieve by it. Notice things and bring them back to your executive director or your board chair. Hey, I just noticed there's a new granting program, or I just noticed this is hitting the news cycle and this might impact us. This one about thanking is probably the place where everybody can play a really meaningful role. A thank you from a board member has way more weight, way more impact than a thank you from a paid staff person. That's just the way it is. So think about that as the entry level for all of your board members. And of course, giving, I would say it's really important for boards to give at 100%. Doesn't mean everybody gives at the same level. Some people can afford $10, some people can afford $100, some people can afford $1,000. But it's in the collective participation that you send a meaningful message to the community that we are all in for this work that we're doing. And then of course there are people that are willing to ask and like it. Your 7s, your 6s that are on the chat, galvanize their effort and energy and equip them with some great materials. Finally, these are just some really simple things that have, I think, made me more successful in this work over 30 years. First thing I had to realize is that this is not about me sitting in front of someone and asking them to give money to me. That was terrifying at the beginning. Like, oh no, what, I don't want to bug my friends. I don't want to sit across from that person and ask them for $100,000. It's about the agency's work and about the donor's passion. So you are really just connecting, and sometimes there's no connection. So get okay with hearing no, great work, but it's not my thing, and I wish you good luck with it. Accept that, because as you get into bigger asks, you're going to hear that 3 out of 4 times. That's the stat. So get okay with hearing no, and get okay with celebrating whatever that donor's passion is and celebrating what they're doing in the community, even if it's not your thing. Being curious about people and remembering the small details about people, whether they are an individual donor, a community investment person downtown with one of the big companies, a granting agency coordinator in government, an MLA. Be curious about them and remember the small details. I need help remembering the small details. So I am forever coming out of a conversation, getting to my car and jotting down a few notes. This person's child is really into ballet. Ask them about, and has a recital coming up. Ask them how it went next time. All of that shouldn't end up on your database. Be careful about what you put in your database. Always be of the mind that you'd be very comfortable showing it to that person. But find a system for yourself to remember the small details about people. That's what builds trust, relationship, rapport. Always having a next opportunity in mind when I leave a conversation with someone that is in service to my organization. Many a time, the tragedy of events is people come together for an open house or a gala, and they have a great time. And on the way out the door, they're saying, that was awesome. So loved hearing about your work. They head home. The board meeting occurs the next week and they say, that was awesome. Everybody, well done. How do we reach those people again? So always be building your list and finding ways to continue the conversation. This is a big one. If I say I'm going to do something, do it on time and delight your donors with your delivery and follow through. I think that has been fundamental to building reputation for organizations and tearing down reputation for organizations with donors. And as I said, gift chart is a huge tool for me that I use all the time. We have 10 minutes left, so not much time for the lightning round, but I'll tell you what I have put into the resource toolkit. One, a document around that whole idea of not-for-profits that don't have registered status while we await government to say it could look like this and funders to say, great, we can respond to that and broaden the playing field. There is a great tool that United Way and Calgary Foundation created around building partnerships with charities if you don't have charity status. So take a look at that. I've plugged a software database. When should we get a database, Gail? When should we stick to Excel and make the migration? There's a tool in there that points you to some resources for free or lower cost solutions, and just some things to think about around capturing information. It's that pots and pans part of your plan that is so important. There is a charity checklist in there, particularly from a board perspective, keeping on top of your governance requirements of being a charity is super important. I find one of the best thought leaders in the country is Mark Bloomberg. He's a lawyer out of Ottawa that has a site built with all kinds of resources for charities around flying right and being on the right side of law when it comes to all of this stuff. He's a lawyer, so it's a little dry, but it's really important. And there's a beautiful checklist that I've put in the toolbox to say, are you getting all of this stuff done so that you're not compromising your CRA status in any way? And there is, I noticed a couple of people are doing capital campaigns, or contemplating capital campaigns for community centers and so on. There's a resource in there around just typical things to think about as you consider a capital campaign sequencing. There's sort of 3 phases that I would encourage you to think about. That was fast and furious. I don't know if we even have time. Maybe I have time for a few more questions. And then we'll go to this question at the very end. Anything else people want to throw out there real quick? Probably got about 3 or 4 minutes by my clock, Justin.
Yeah. Thanks, Gail. Yeah, we have a couple of questions here. How do you balance a capital campaign alongside meeting your regular fundraising goals?
Yes, the larger organizations just stay in campaign all the time and they roll it all up together. Universities and so on call it comprehensive campaigns. I think you would just really need to examine, and the annual plan workbook might help you with this. You really need to dive into who's supporting you now and who is predictably supporting you, and whether you can go back to them to have a this and that conversation. Not impossible to do when you've got a one-time capital effort to say, we so appreciate your support annually. We need it to continue, but this is a special project that we hope you might consider doing an extraordinary gift to and maintaining your annual support. Generally, a capital campaign requires you to keep your annual and then bring a whole lot of new prospects into the picture. And through doing that, you should see your annual program strengthened through that exercise and come out the end of the capital campaign more sustainable and larger, because you've talked to more people about your work, you've added donors to the mix. That's a short.
And maybe we have room for, because I've seen a few questions around organizations on this call today. Maybe they're smaller organizations. So how much usually falls to the board versus staff? we're finding time and leadership commitments challenging.
Yeah, it's such a big one. If you have no staff, or if you have some staff but not enough to get where you want to go, the reality of smaller organizations is, again, they have to do this and that, be great at governance and roll up their sleeves and get involved in fund development. Now, I personally believe, whether you're big, small, or medium, board members should be involved in fund development in some form or fashion. Back to that list, help us thank people, because if it rests on the shoulders, I've been there, if the whole capital campaign is resting on my shoulders and my board is not engaged or involved in some way, I can't get to that volume and quality formula myself. It's impossible, right? So everybody has to play.
Yeah. Thanks, Gail. I know you have your details here if folks want to reach out for other specific things here. We'll move on to the next few slides here.
Just super quick,
Yeah.
are people feeling any different from this morning when we started on your number? Any 10s in there yet?
Okay, someone said they moved to 3 from a 1. We have some 8s.
That's good.
9s, 10. Someone did put down a 10.
Awesome.
I think a lot of folks definitely feel more confident, in their fund development strategies for sure.
I mean, this has been rapid fire. I totally appreciate, but hopefully some of the tools will, you sit with them, soak with them. And if you've got little questions, by all means, reach out. I'm a whiz at email and punching out a few quick responses to you. I also want to offer up, I'm happy to, I don't know how you'll do this, Justin, but if people are interested in putting their name in for a draw, I will do 2 1-hour, I call them power hours, with 2 of your participants to talk specifically about your organization. We can unpack some of this stuff specific to your unique circumstances.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. Yeah, there will be, I know Phil mentioned in the chat as well, all the resources, the toolbox, all those things you will get shortly after, I finish editing the recording here. And it will let you know how you can enter in the draw for this power hour. So keep an eye on your emails as well. And then, I'm seeing in the chat, Gail, that people are very interested in the power hour. So so keep an eye on your emails a few days, maybe midweek next week, and you'll see how you can register for that draw, that power hour draw. Excellent.
So yes, I look forward to the feedback. It's a gift, whether you've been in this business 1 year, 2 year, or 30 years. So please do give me some feedback, and please stay connected. LinkedIn also, super important tool for fund developer. So if you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. I use it almost every day in my fundraising work. And if you want to link or follow, and as I say, reach out, stay in touch.
Great.
Thank you.
Phil, I'll ask you to, if you can put Gail's email there, Phil, in the chat, that would be great, just so people can copy and paste from there. A couple more slides here, just really quick. Again, thank you so much, Gail. Super informative. It was great with a lot of, and I know folks come to here, just give me the tools. I just want the tools. And you have that both. You had some great tools that will be offered. So we're excited to take a look at that. Just a couple more quick things here in this last minute. Phil is going to put a link to the evaluation in the chat. Please fill that out. Doesn't take very long. You'll also get a link in your email shortly here. And we'd love to have the feedback as well. It helps us really inform future events. Our last Board Leadership Calgary event of the year will be in 2 weeks, a Saturday as well. Strategic thinking, then strategic planning. Just serendipitously, I know Gail talked about strategic planning and having some of these things in place. So great alignment there. So if that's something that you're interested in, please check that out. the BLC Eventbrite page, you definitely know where that is because you signed up for here. So thank you for that. Again, thank you for taking your Saturday to spend your time with us here as well. Again, any questions for Gail, you have her email there. You're going to get all that info, and this will be shortly again up on our YouTube page. So thanks everyone so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see some of you in a few weeks.